Wall Street Journal calls us a world-class museum. We actually have several museums here. Hopefully, you're going to have time to walk through the entire campus. Our ticket, when you actually buy a ticket, is good for 48 hours because we've calculated, if you read every single word in the museum and you watched every single film, it would take almost 11 hours just to do that. It is a significant museum. We've got which is the Bush Gallery here, which focuses on operations in World War II in Asia Pacific. We have the Nimitz Museum up in the old Nimitz Hotel, which focuses on Admiral Nimitz. Of course, he was born here, spent first 5 or 6 years here, and then he went to Kerrville, and that's where he actually got his appointment to the Naval Academy. Now, all of you are hoping to go to one of the academies, right?
Yes, sir.
Let me tell you a story about Admiral Nimitz. He was going to school in Kerrville, and he wanted to go to West Point, but there were no appointments available to West Point, and he heard that there was a competitive appointment available for the Naval Academy. And he was working full-time at his parents' hotel there in Kerrville. Plus he was going to school. So he got up around 3 o'clock every single morning to study for the exam for the Naval Academy. Then he did his chores. Then he went to school. Then he came back, did more chores, studied for the next day, and then went to bed, got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and did it again. And that was his desire, to go to the Naval Academy. And he aced that particular examination, and the rest is history. Another footnote, he did not graduate from high school. He went to the Naval Academy without a high school diploma. You could back in the late 1800s. And after he was promoted to 5-star admiral, after the war, after he'd been victorious in the Pacific, he came back here, and Kerrville gave him an honorary high school diploma. So he actually finally got his high school diploma. Some of you may be concerned. I would assume that most of you try to get into one of the academies right out of high school, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How many hope to go to West Point? How many hope to go to Air Force Academy? And how many are hoping to go to the Academy, the Naval Academy? I tried to get into the Academy out of, I graduated, I was raised here in Fredericksburg. I graduated high school. I tried to go to the Naval Academy after high school, and I didn't make it. I didn't even know anything about these various prep schools at that time, so I went to the University of Texas for a year, and then was lucky enough to be appointed the following year. And some individuals may tell you that, oh, you're a year behind, you're going to be behind your peers, and I can tell you that's absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. For me, it was a real advantage to go to UT for a year. I was more mature after a year out on my own than I would have been if I'd have gone directly to the Naval Academy. I had a year of college underneath my belt, so the courses my plebe year were a whole lot easier than they would have been if I would have gone directly. So I saw no disadvantage whatsoever. I used to sit on the Naval Academy's admissions board, so I know a little bit about what the academies look for. In just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to a Q&A. But I can tell you that, yeah, do they look for grades? Absolutely. Do they look for extracurricular activities? Yeah, absolutely. Do they look for participation in sports? Yes. Would they like to have a Roger Staubach? Yes, but there's probably not a Roger Staubach sitting out here right now. You know, Roger Staubach went to a prep school too, out at New Mexico Military Institute before he went to the Naval Academy. He was actually sitting on the bench, but that's another story. What they're looking for are individuals that really want to go to an academy, like Nimitz did. And you going to a prep school like Greystone indicates to them that, in fact, you want to go. No guarantees, but I remember when we would go through applications of individuals from prep school, that played big. Because you could have gone off to another school, you could almost be a year down towards graduation. You go to one of the academies, you still have 4 years to look at. So I'm not going to hold you here. I always like the Q&A a lot better than just me up here talking about what you may or may not be interested in. So I'm ready to answer questions about anything. Over to you. Yeah.
How was your experience in the Marine Corps, sir?
How was my experience in the Marine Corps? Well, I stayed almost 40 years, so it was actually pretty good. And everyone's different. I didn't go in thinking I was going to stay that long. I wasn't even sure I was going to stay till 20. In fact, I almost got out of the Marine Corps several times. I accepted 2 jobs, once when I was a captain, once when I was a major, and once when I was a colonel, to leave the Marine Corps. But when push came to shove, I enjoyed it too much. I enjoyed initially the guys, and then later on I enjoyed the guys and the gals that were young Marines. I tell you, today, the young Americans that are in all the services are absolutely high water. And if you're lucky enough to go to one of the academies and get a commission, you're going to have to run really hard to stay up with them. A little bit different than when I was a lieutenant. I was in Vietnam. GCT, does that mean anything to you, general classification? You'll take a GCT sometime. And the average GCT, sort of like an IQ, is about 100 for the average person. No, at least when I was a lieutenant, in order to be an officer, you had to have 120 just to qualify. What the average GCT was in my company in Vietnam, 64. It wasn't the best of the ranks. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Were they good individuals? Absolutely, they were good. They were doing what their country asked for them, even though they were not receiving much recognition. Today, we don't have any of those individuals in the service. They're there because their country has asked them to do something, but they are sharp, they are dedicated, and they are motivated. And in order for you to lead them, you're going to have that same motivation, and you're going to have to listen, and you're going to have to study. And I can tell you, it never stops. So I enjoyed the Marine Corps. Were there times when it wasn't as much fun? Yeah, there was. But overall, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Going to get rich? No. But that really didn't bother me. I enjoyed being with these young Americans. But yeah, hold it back.
What experiences did you have at the academy that led you to service select to the Marine Corps?
Well, a great question. My dad served in the Pacific in World War II. He was a Navy chief. I went to the Naval Academy with full intent of going into the Navy. But when I got there, I looked around and I saw these Marine officers walking around. And I had to be honest, I saw the Navy officers walking around, and I said, I want to be like those guys. There was nothing more sophisticated than that. I want to be like them. There was another reason. I graduated from the Academy in '68. For those of you who have read history, Tet Offensive occurred in February of '68. And in order to get a command in the Navy, you had to wait until, if you were lucky, you'd get it as a lieutenant, probably as a lieutenant commander. If I joined the Marine Corps, I knew I was going to get a command right away as a second lieutenant. So that drove some of it too. What else? Yeah.
As a senior military officer, what does leadership serve to you, sir?
Well, as a senior military officer, what does leadership mean? To me, leadership is pretty much the same, regardless of whether you're a lieutenant or you happen to be commandant of the Marine Corps. Quite a few people ask me, what's the most important thing in leadership? And you've probably heard, what is the normal answer when someone asks that? Hello? Anyone? Okay, most time you hear integrity. I would say that's wrong. You can be the most honest, upstanding citizen around. But that will not necessarily make you a great guy or gal to go out and have a beer with. But as far as being a leader, I don't know. I think integrity is a part of it. I think there are actually three parts of being a successful leader. And number one is building a team. In the Marine Corps, we take you to boot camp, and we try to take your identity away from you. Because it's not about you. It's not about the individual. It's about the squad, the platoon, the company, the battalion, the division. And when I retired, it was about the Marine Corps. That was the number one thing. And your job as a leader is to build that team. Everyone knows who's in charge. But if you don't have a team, and you're not working as a team, and you're not sharing experiences, and you're not listening to one another, then I would suggest you're not going to be a leader. Number two, obviously, you have to have integrity. Especially today. The troops will know like that. You can say whatever you want. They're watching you. And they're going to know. And even if you have those two things, I would argue you're still a great person to go have a beer with. But you're not necessarily a leader. What am I missing? What? No. Courage, you have to have courage. Physical courage, quite honestly, is easy. Moral courage, a little more difficult. And we're back to integrity again. What? Humility is very good, but no.
Proficiency.
You have to accomplish the mission, right?
Proficiency.
How many times have you heard you have to have humility, you have to have this, you have to have that, you have to have something else? But if you don't accomplish the mission, then you're just a nice guy or a nice gal. And that's the same in the military, and it's the same in the civilian world. You've got to accomplish the mission. That is the number one thing. How you go about doing it, that's what leadership is about. The only difference between leading at the platoon level, or the major difference between leading at the platoon level and being a division commander or corps commander or commandant of the Marine Corps, is you have a staff. And that's, I won't even go into that because you're not anywhere near that. That's a whole nother type of leadership to get that staff working as that team that I talked about. What else? Ready to go tour the museum, huh? Okay, I wish you all, when do you find it? Well, what do we have now? Oh, you should be finding out. Have you found out yet whether you're going?
We have 4 appointments, sir.
Say again?
4 appointments thus far.
4 appointments, sir,
4 appointments.
so far.
And when is, what do we have now? February? Ooh, you should be finding out very soon. Is this normal?
Sir.
And when is the date where you say, uh-oh, I'm probably going to go to UT or A&M or someplace else?
Sometime late April.
Or late April? Okay. Well, thank you all for being here, and I wish you the best of success in getting into the academy. And if you get there, don't take things personally. you're not necessarily going to be happy all the time that you're there. And sometimes it'll be really difficult. But if you get there, you can graduate if you want to. The academics, depending on where you are, the academics can be tough, the physical part can be tough. Some of the BS, what I can think of, that goes on as far as indoctrination and the plebe system. I would change that if I could, but you're not going to change that. You have to put up with some of that. If you want to graduate, sort of like with Nimitz, you can graduate. You just have to stay dedicated and let some of that stuff just sort of roll right over you, because it will pass, especially after the first year. Okay, now I turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
So on behalf of our board of directors and our executive director, we'd like to express our appreciation for your remarks, your welcome, and mostly for opening up this institution for these young future officers to come and start to appreciate their history a little bit more and the legacy of the officers and the fighting men and women who have gone before us. And on behalf of us, we'd like to give you our Greystone Challenge Point.
Thank you very much.
And come on there and just thank you so much for having us out today, sir.
Yeah, my pleasure.